everybody. This is Groundhog Day, February 2nd, 2026. I've been posting these videos as a way of dealing with the trauma of dealing with the Canadian judicial system and watching my little brother, Paul, 64 with Down syndrome, be locked away by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government, David Eby as the leader, for 588 days. We had 176 missed scheduled in-person visits before Paul passed away on April 23rd of 2024. And after Paul passed away, the person that the government appointed as his guardian, my 83-year-old Catholic nun sister, 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario, who was 16 years older than Paul, never lived with him, never grew up with him, went after me and had me designated permanently as a vexatious litigant. That's an unusual and very rare designation in Canadian law that takes away your access to the courts. So I can't file anything in court, even in response to somebody suing me without permission of a judge. I was the first single mother to graduate from UBC Law School in history, and I practiced family law for 23 years. I was a federal prosecutor, and then I practiced family law for 23 years. So this is a horrible stain on my reputation. It's destroyed my credit rating, and it's destroyed my reputation. You can imagine there's really nothing worse other than being incarcerated. It's really a quasi-criminal sanction that's very rarely imposed. So, as you know, I'm just waiting to hear I got an email from the Supreme Court of Canada last week saying that the decision on whether I can appeal my designation as a vexatious litigant is going to be released on this coming Thursday, February 5th. So my heart's pounding. It's very stressful. I worked on the documents I need. I'm acting on the assumption I'm going to be granted permission to proceed, and I'm working on the documents that I'll have to file in an appeal at the Supreme Court of Canada. And I feel pretty good that everything's under control. Today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different, what's been on my mind since immediately after Donald Trump was elected President of the United States on November 4th of 2024, I guess it was. The very first thing that he said was he made a snide remark to then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, saying that he would treat him as the governor of the 51st state, which was so shocking. I had been sort of neutral about Donald Trump, and I was trying to think positively about him. And then he threatened the sovereignty of my beloved country. I hitchhiked across Canada twice before I turned 18. I also hitchhiked from Montreal to Miami. But I'd like to think that I know every square inch of Canada. On one occasion, I had to fly from Victoria to St. John's, Newfoundland to visit my dad. But what I wanted to talk about briefly now is that I was at ground zero with what the American administration and Donald Trump are trying to do is break up Canada by undermining Alberta's place in the Confederation. He's going after the Alberta, which he sees as being full of mineral and oil wealth. And I was at ground zero when I was 14 years old. In the October 1970, I was at ground zero of the last separation crisis, literally at ground zero. So you may not know this, but the Fédération Libération de Québec was a group of terrorists, separatist, francophone separatist terrorists in Quebec. And my father had just moved our whole family to downtown Montreal, which is a city called Westmount, and smack in the middle of the island of Montreal. And he was so excited because he was one of the co-designers of the Churchill Falls Labrador hydroelectric project, which was then the biggest construction project in the world. My dad was a safety engineer, a mining engineer. So he was so excited about this project, and he moved all of us, great big family, from Sudbury, Ontario, where he had worked underground as a mining engineer, to Montreal, so that he could work on this co-designing. He designed the interior of this. The Churchill Falls hydroelectric project is a big underground. It's carved out of solid granite underground with the what are the pin stocks or the machines that create the hydroelectric power are all buried underground. And my dad was a specialist in underground structures. So he was hired as the co-designer. He designed the interior ceiling of the Churchill Falls. But anyway, so he moved, this was a huge endeavor to move a big family with 9 kids from Sudbury to Montreal. And I remember the trip we drove in the station wagon from Sudbury to Montreal. And my dad was a third generation or second generation Montrealer. He had grown up in Point Saint Henri on the eastern end of Montreal Island. And he was so happy to settle us all there. But when we got there in the fall of 1969, it was beginning to be the height of the reign of terror by the FLQ on Montreal. And what they would do is they would put bombs in postal boxes and blow them up. And they killed a federal worker. A woman was delivering or picking up some postage from a postal box, and she was blown up in an alley in Montreal. I think that was in the fall of 1969. And then it got to the point where about every 10 days there would be a bomb that would go off on the island of Montreal, and mostly in our neighborhood because we were in an Anglophone neighborhood of Westmount. And there was a bomb that went off on our block and blew all the windows out on our block. And I think there was a little girl who was injured across the street. But I'm sure my dad thought, what the hell did I do? I bring my family to this city and it's undergoing this. It was terrifying. It was terrifying. It was just, but it sort of was normal and terrifying. I was just a little 14-year-old girl, and in those Catholic school girl uniforms, and I was just getting used to the city and the new language, and to have bombs going off in your city, blowing up people and blowing up post boxes, because there would be the insignia for Canada would be on every post box. So it was terrifying, and then it just got worse and worse. And the FLQ kidnapped Pierre Laporte, who was the deputy minister, premier of Quebec, and James Cross, who was the consulate, the head of the British consulate to Montreal. So they kidnapped and they murdered Pierre Laporte and stuffed his body in the back of a vehicle. And they kidnapped, as I said, James Cross. And while this was going on, Pierre Trudeau sent in the Canadian Army in full force. You have never seen anything in your country until you see tanks rolling down Sherbrooke Street, the main street, the main drag that bisected Montreal Island. Sherbrooke Street had a long line of tanks, I guess they were Sherman tanks, and thousands of soldiers. There were snipers on every rooftop. And because we had a federal minister living on our block 2 doors down, he had a Canadian Armed Forces member with a rifle and the full battle gear at the front door and the back door. And it was terrifying. And I think ultimately it led to my decision to leave Quebec and to move to Greater Vancouver. And I've been here since 1973. But it's no fun. It's not funny and it's not cute. It's terrifying. And real people get blown up and real people die. I've had a difficult time with the Canadian judicial system in the last 5 years, but I would die for Canada. I was working in for the Conservative Party for Paul Lambert, and he took me to Wendy's for lunch one day, and we were just driving along, and I said something like, I would die for Canada. And he said, yeah, I would too. There's not many things I would die for. My family and Canada. So I've been at ground zero, and it happened so fast. Quebec fell from being under French control in 15 minutes on September 13, 1759, at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in Quebec City. And both generals, Louis Montcalm and James Wolfe, died in that battle. But it only took 15 minutes. And if you don't think Canada could fall again in 15 minutes, think again. So I just wanted to give you, this has been on my mind, obviously, with that horrible, terrible statement by the disgusting President Donald Trump. It's like somebody saying they wanted to rape your daughter. Or maybe it's worse than that. So think twice, because it affects real people, and real people die, and real people are blown up, and real people are kidnapped, and real people are hurt, and real economies are affected. I love you all. Take care.